I'm currently at the Evangelical Theological Faculty in Leuven in Belgium, and I'm here to speak to some of the authors and editors of a book that recently appeared with Peeters Press in 2014 with the title Leadership, Innovation and Spirituality. This is a fascinating and innovative book because it brings the old and the new in dialogue with one another. The old spirituality and the new innovation within the context of leadership. Let's talk to some of the authors and editors to find out what they think about the book and its contribution that it can make within the fields of theology and business ethics.
I think we focus on leadership theory, and that is a very interdisciplinary new field that is growing fast. There is a tendency to make a distinction between management and leadership, where leadership is more dealing with the general direction we go, that is more dealing with encouraging people to a certain goal, and this opens up the importance of a broader view on life, a broader view on what is important to us, our values, and also the importance of innovative thinking, coming up with new concepts, solving issues, especially complex tensions and conflicts. It's something that management has a hard time with, to deal with conflicts and tensions and cross-cultural challenges. So innovation and spirituality, or let's say a rich personal life, vita contemplativa, a contemplative life, is essential for a vita activa, an active life as a leader. So there they come together. Yeah.
Now, in the past, we saw some studies on, for instance, leadership and the new, science and leadership and concepts of, for instance, Eastern philosophy that is brought within the corporate world, but we seldom find literature from a Christian perspective that sort of brings in the Christian narratives or metaphors.
Yes.
But in the book you did something on the metaphors of Christianity and how it can help a corporate leader in understanding his role as a leader.
Yes, I think it's a missed opportunity. Christianity has a very rich tradition, a spiritual tradition, but also, especially Reformation and Protestantism, also has a tradition of the workplace and our role or call in society, in the world. So we have to bring in those traditions or theology of work, theology of feeling called. I think that was one of the messages of Luther, that you can be called in the world. And this is also why I showed some sympathy for Bonhoeffer, who says that all reality is Christ's reality, which means that when you're in the middle of corporate business or leading a firm, you are in Christ's reality. Now that changes your whole view on life, and I think this is a very rich resource to use for your call as a leader in the public domain.
How is the Christian story or the Christian narrative going to help us in this sense to connect people to a greater purpose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this can be one of the most beautiful and encouraging things if you're leading a group of people. If you open your eyes for this challenge of helping them to grow, to develop as a person. And I think this is where Christian love is so important. You really believe that you're more than just creating wealth, you're creating even joy and happiness as you have little victories but also challenges in your company or organization. So managerial, you can negotiate about many things, little details about workload, hours, finances, but as a leader, to encourage them to see the bigger picture and give them a sense of worth and calling, considering them to be important and see how they can develop as an individual, is also for you as a leader something you really feel like you're doing something meaningful as a Christian. So actually that's one thing, the Christian love story. The second one, I think the whole idea of stewardship is that you are aware that all the gifts and capacities you have are actually by grace. So everything is out of grace, which means that we are just only acting as stewards to be as efficient as possible with the limited gifts we have received. They're not even our own. Even our finances are not really our possession to the full meaning of the word. So this Christian perspective on the other person and the value of the other person and stewardship, I think, changes your whole view on managerial negotiations and commitment. I think one of the beautiful things about what we do with the Institute of Leadership and Ethics is that we are always in close contact and dialogue with people in the business community or public domain leadership positions. And often they don't share the typical Christian beliefs or are not so church connected. As a theologian, you're really challenged there, because when we use some Christian terminology, we have a whole tradition and a whole interpretation connected to it. And now we are kind of pressed to rethink it and think about how can this metaphor, this idea, be relevant for the people in their own context. So indeed we have to forget and to remember at the same time. And I think that is the tricky thing. What do we have to forget? I think what we have to forget is the whole superficial knowledge we think we have about all those terms like salvation, sin, forgiveness, reconciliation. Try to, and in this dialogue you're forced to go deeper and to rethink those concepts. I think this is all what good theology has to be. Good theology is always coming up from a clear challenge and then writing a response. This is also why I like all theology that has been developed during and before and right after the Second World War, because there you had theologians that are really comfortable with National Socialism, with some challenge. And I think in South Africa you have a similar story, that you're so confronted with some cultural, social issues that you have to forget on the one hand and innovate on the other hand. So I think yes, it's time to do it, but this time is also very contextual, and we have to be aware what are the challenges in our own community, and I speak about community as a social community, not the church, but outside that, and rethink our own theology from there. And if we do that, we'll be very innovative and contribute to the overall debate, I think.
Yes. I think we observed that in the leadership literature, innovation has already been for decades an important theme. Since the 80s, innovation was the way to survive. Typically, spirituality was not part of the business world because that was considered another domain. And in the Christian world, it seems like the opposite. We've rediscovered spirituality, but we discover spirituality sometimes as a force for conserving rather than for innovation. Now you see a crossover. You see that in the business world, spiritual values are becoming important, but spiritual values in a very generic way. Often, certainly in Europe, not in a Christian way, because the perception seems to be that this is something that we've tried for ages, for centuries. Look at all the religious wars that Christianity has caused. Obviously this is not our where we will get our help and values. And so people turn to other things that they don't know much about, like Buddhism or Hinduism, and find inspiration from that. But it's at least very interesting that now the business world is open to spiritual values, although they're very reluctant to connect spirituality and religion, of course. And you see in the church world that innovation has become more and more important. Certainly in Europe we see mainline denominations crumbling. In my own city, in Maastricht, 5 out of 6 Catholic churches have closed or will soon close. In the next 30 years, the Protestant Church of the Netherlands expects to close 90% of its church buildings. So it's a dying church, and now the traditional denominations are beginning to realize they need pioneers, innovators, to start afresh. So you see a crossover of spirituality into the business world and the business value of innovation into the religious world. And I think the combination of spiritual values for truthful, for faithful innovation is a very significant step to make that combination, to make that link.